Interview prep. So your one of your points was that you can never be overdressed. But what happens if you turn up in a suit and tie to a tech firm who wears jeans and a t-shirt?
Well, I think that's too much. I think you have to cater to your audience. You know what I mean? I mean, even if you're a senior leader at a firm and you're working in financial services or insurance, I still think at this point in time, if you show up in a full suit and tie on a video call, it might be a little much just because that's not the way people dress nowadays. You know, I've got my quarter zip and my polo on constantly. So
Yeah, yeah,
I think it depends, you know?
yeah. When I started in recruiting a while ago now, it was always like, the classic was like, you can never be overdressed, or
Right.
you can always take the tie off, but if you turn up without a tie and they've got a tie on, and it's a little, but the thing is, like, first impressions really matter.
Right.
And I think back when I started, it was mostly all face to face. And in financial services, you go in a tie. I used to live in my tie. Just I live in it. I think now,
Right.
though, I think with COVID and with video, it's a bit more of a minefield now. I think, like, I had feedback from a candidate went for an interview, and the feedback from the client was he was wearing a suit and tie. He's not going to fit here.
Right. So they look down on that.
They rejected him.
Yeah.
They rejected him.
Which, I mean, I think it comes down more to just showing respect for the person that you're speaking with, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone should ever look down on a suit and tie. That means that you've put the time in, you're interested in the role, you're interested in the company, you want to make a good impression.
Yeah.
You know, it might throw people off just because people aren't used to that anymore. So again, I think it just comes down to who you're speaking with, what's the role, what's the culture of the company, which is important to look into before you have your discussion, because then you'll have a better idea. You know, do your background research, you know, do your due diligence, try to get a sense of who you're speaking with and maybe what they do on LinkedIn, what they're posting, social media, and then you'll probably have a better sense of how you want to present yourself, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, prepare's good. If you're going through a recruiter, definitely ask the recruiter what the vibe is, because they should know who you're interviewing with. And if
Right.
they're a jeans and t-shirts kind of person, you want to go jeans and t-shirt.
Exactly.
If it's suit and tie, you go suit and tie. I mean, you just got to kind of, because people like themselves, and just subconsciously you turn up in the similar vibe, then it's more likely to go well. You kind of just set the scene for the interview.
Totally. Totally. And I mean, given that we're constantly working remotely, I find that it makes a big difference to actually put yourself together, even if you're just having a regular catch-up call, because it puts you in the mindset of, all right,
Yeah.
this is important. I want to put my best foot forward and I want to make a good impression. So that's just me. You know, some people might have, you know, a button down and sweatpants on, but it's up to you and how you feel, you know?
Yeah. No, dressing nicely puts you in a whole different mindset. That's why, like, the suit is actually good, because the minute you put a suit on,
You're ready to
you're
go.
like, you're ready to
Suiting
go.
up.
You're ready to go. But definitely, like, prepare for it and feel what the vibe is. And if you're working in an industry that's not a suit and tie, don't wear a suit and tie. Or if you turn up for a bank, just dress appropriately, I think, is probably the important bit.
100%. But I do think it's much better to be overdressed than underdressed,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, for sure. On the prep side, I think it's worth mentioning, and you mentioned LinkedIn just now. What advice would you give to people preparing for an interview?
I always put more stress on doing your research on the team because you want to learn about people's backgrounds, mainly the hiring manager. Where did they work before? Where did they come from? If they're posting consistently, if they you know are active on LinkedIn, you'll get a sense of what they're passionate about, what they care about as far as the industry, their business goes. I think that's super important. So I think more importantly than diving in, especially on an initial call, than diving into the roles and responsibilities and how am I going to answer all of these questions, it's more important to kind of have a more of a personal view on on who you're speaking with, and then who are the other members on the team that you could potentially be working alongside with if you were to end up in that role. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
most important.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone check them out on LinkedIn. And also you can, if they are posting, to your point, start liking their content, start
Yeah.
commenting, and then they'll be like, oh, who's this person like liking and commenting
Right.
on my stuff? And whether they like it or not, they're going to start to like you.
Yeah.
And all these little things, they might sound small, but they add up. And suddenly you turn up looking sharp. You've liked and commented on all of their stuff. You've seen maybe you go play in the set, both you like golf or sailing, or there's some like common connection that you found that you can drop in, and suddenly you just feel more, what they say, fail to prepare to fail, something like that. Like you're in a good shape, and LinkedIn is just no excuse not to find out about who you're meeting. It's just so easy to do. Very important. I would then, next stage for me is like, for me, the interviewing is all about storytelling,
Right.
and just start to think about however they ask you, whether it's like a classic old school, give me an example of when you have, or whether they just start with, tell me about yourself, or go through, think of it as a story. Think of examples and as a story. You're the hero in the story. And if you structure your answers like that, it's a really nice way to go about doing it.
Yeah.
I would do that.
And I think it's important, just, going back to like the personal side of things, to weave in where you came from, how you've grown over the years. You don't just want to go through, if they say, tell me about yourself, you don't just want to go through your work experience right off the bat. It goes back to the whole thing of bring your authentic self to work, which you don't want to cross that line too much, but people want to get a sense of who you actually are, where you've been, why you're interested in what you're doing now, and where you want to go in the future. So I think if you're able to bring stories about real life and how you've grown personally and developed over the years, that makes a huge difference, because they find out about your character more so than if you're just talking about work.
Definitely. You got to advocate for yourself, demonstrate what your superpowers are, and you package it in the right way. It's awesome. The other thing for me is, do not forget that you are interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And so, like, make sure you prepare loads and loads of questions. I think often you tell a lot more about someone by the questions that they ask, because you can prepare your story, you can prepare questions, you kind of know roughly what they're going to ask you. You've read the spec, hopefully. You know broadly what they're looking for, because they've probably written the spec, so you can tell you all the stuff. But it's interesting with questions.
So I wanted to add, like, when you're prepping people for first stage, second stage, third stage, as far as questions go, what do you typically tell them to have prepared? Because I often find if you have too many questions in the back of your head as you're having a conversation, it's hard to kind of pull those forward. So what would you tell people ahead of time?
I think there's a few things. So for me, so much of it's about the people and the culture and what it's like. Because a lot of the time, like, you're going to be doing the same job, but in a different place, right?
Yeah.
So like the job's the job, but the difference is like the people. And so I'm interested in, and I think most people are, like, what are they like? What's the culture like? Is it supportive, kind, nurturing? Are they going to develop me? What's it like when the going gets tough? Like when you're in the trenches and stuff. And it's sometimes hard to find out in an interview. But there's a lot of stuff you can do. I don't like, my favorite question, like just after COVID, it was like, how did your company treat your folks over COVID?
Right.
And they were like, you could see it's like, oh my God, they just made everyone redundant, like from day one, or they did their best to try and keep us. And so, something around people and culture. If you've done your research on the interviewer and you've noticed that they've only just joined a year or less, or maybe even 2 ago, then it's great, because then you can start asking, what's it like? Like, what's it really like to work in this particular firm? Then you can ask, like, what's their management style like? If you're meeting the line manager, how do you like to work? How do you like to operate? And then ask stuff that's important to you. If it's like you want to be flexible, you need flexible working. There's a lot of big companies now that are going back to 5 days a week.
Right.
And so you got to think, like, what's important for you. And don't be afraid to ask those questions, like, right up front, because otherwise you might wander in and it's like, you're in
Yeah.
5 days, my friend.
Yeah.
And they're
You
like,
got to know what you're getting into, you know?
yeah, just write this all down. Like, this is you interviewing them. And obviously, like, sometimes it's different, right? Like, if you've got no job right now, you want to get a job, right? So like economics, like, you need to earn money. And so your mindset might be slightly different, right? You're willing to sacrifice on some things. But I think you come across like just way different if you are, you know what you want, like, you've prepared questions. So that's the personal stuff. And then it's like job content, like, do
Right.
your due diligence. We've seen so many VC backed firms and tech firms make redundancies this last 6 months, right? So like, do your due diligence. Like, are you, how well capitalized are you? You know, like, look at their balance sheet. Like, you know, what have they just made? Like 7,000 people redundant last week. Did they hire 100? You know, like, just where are they at? And just say, then you can make a decision as to whether you're comfortable going into an environment where they hire fast and fire fast,
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
you know, or they're more stable, long established. So you got to take a view on like where you're at with that. I would just definitely do your due diligence. My last point is, and there's a lot of conversation about like how many interview stages. You know, this online, it's classic, like, you know, 3 stages and quick interview processes and stuff. But I think it's good for a candidate to want to meet a lot of folks, because again,
Right.
it just lowers your risk a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I
You know?
mean, it's always nice when hiring managers that we work with are open to that, and they say, if you get to the offer stage and they're, you know, going to extend something to this specific candidate, I think it's so helpful and so important for them to say, also, if they want to meet any additional team members, let me know, bring them into the office. They'll get a feel for how we work. They'll know who
Yeah.
they're working with. I think that extra step is huge.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that sometimes falls down is if the client doesn't communicate with the candidate up front how long the process is going to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, for hiring managers, I think that's important. And then for candidates, it's good to want to meet a few folks. The other thing, the good reason for that is you often see like someone's hiring manager's left, and then suddenly your sponsor's gone. Someone new comes in, and they bring in their own folks, or they change the team and stuff. So if you've met a few more of the senior leaders, I think it's a little bit more, you've got a little bit more like social clout or whatever you want to call it, that I think that will just minimize that risk a little bit, which I think is interesting.
100%.
What do you think about thank you notes?
Need them.
Yeah.
I think it's a lost art. I mean, sometimes we have to remind candidates, you know, it might, if you're really interested in this, it might be helpful if you send a thank you note. But I think sometimes people forget, you know, it doesn't always happen. I would always set reminders for myself to send a thank you note, you know, when I was interviewing over time. It only shows how much more interested you are in the role. And again, it's that level of respect. Thank you for, again, yeah, of course you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you, but you have to show appreciation for, thank you for having this conversation with me. I'm very excited at the opportunity. You know, it can only help.
Yeah. I'm a massive fan. Fan.
I don't think, you know, years ago it would be send an actual note to the person. I don't think you have to do that. A quick email, you know, later in the day or the following day should do the trick.
It's nice. And don't make it salesy. Some of them are like, you know, oh, really great to meet you. And I'm thinking I'm the perfect candidate for the job because X, Y, Z, you know, and I think I just fit great. And forget the sales. Don't, just keep the sales out of it. And I know it's like, if you really want the job, it's so tempting to, oh, I forgot to say, you know, actually I've got, you know, this like experience that I forgot to mention. And, you know, I think just keep it like, thank you, really appreciate your time, you know, really interested in moving forward, or look forward to hearing from next steps, or something like that. I think's the right tone. And whether you're going through a recruiter or not, send a thank you note. Like, just send it. I think it's a really cool thing to do. And it feels nice. I had someone that sent me a paperless postcard to say thank you. And I was like, well, I've got this thing, and you press open, and it's this beautiful card. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I just really liked that person. I couldn't help it.
So was this for from a candidate that you had placed, or what was the
Yeah,
thank you
it's
for?
actually a
Yeah.
placement. I placed
Okay.
this lady, and she sent me a really lovely thank you note. I mean, us recruiters don't often get thank you notes from candidates. So if you're listening, always send a thank you note to your recruiter.
I got a very
But
nice gift from one as well right before Christmas, and yeah, it just adds that extra level of, this person's going to be happy where they are. I'm very happy we made the connection, and that just makes the relationship stronger, because you're always going to remember that little extra gift, and you put more time into figuring out how that person is doing along the way, and you just stay in touch more consistently.
definitely. Gratitude is great. Whoever you're dealing with, like whoever in the work context, like hiring managers, recruiters, EAs who've helped you organize them, or whoever it is, it just, it's just saying thank you is a really powerful thing. Anything else you'd add?
I think it's important to put in the time and preparation a few days in advance. Then maybe the night before you're speaking with this person, brush up on things, try to let it marinate in your head, and don't over prepare the day of, because then you're going to have too many thoughts rushing through your head, and you won't be able to speak to it in the right way, I think. So
True.
it kind of comes down to the questions you want to ask. You actually want to ask questions that you're curious about learning, not just to say, oh, I have 3 questions that will make me look good.
Yeah. No, definitely. And don't have too much coffee. Chill out on the
Yeah,
coffee.
exactly. Yeah.
Have some water. And then also there's a little bit of difference between the in-person and the video as well. So I think, if you've got a video, if it's a video interview, no excuse for a bad camera
Right.
nowadays.
Make sure everything is set up
Light behind
accordingly.
and
Test
stuff.
it out.
Set yourself up, and then don't be surprised when they ask you for a face-to-face. I've had a few
Right.
people, like it's getting back to that now. Like you want to meet
Yeah.
folks face-to-face if you're nearby, and and whatever, if it's possible, if they ask you in. A lot of the senior leadership roles, if not all of them now, there's some face-to-face towards the end. They'll fly you over and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's useful.